Welcome to Imagining Otherwise, a podcast from CAPE. I'm Dami, and in this episode I'm joined by Jenn Plews OBE, Chief Executive Officer of Northern Star Academies Trust, and Professor Jonathan Sharples, Professorial Research Fellow at the Education Endowment Foundation, the EEF. Together, we explore what it takes to embed climate change education into school life, not as a one-off initiative, but as a long-term strategic commitment. Drawing on evidence and implementation practices, Jenn and Jonathan discuss how purposeful leadership, strong culture, and processes can make climate change education meaningful, lasting, and part of a school's core purpose. This is a rich but practical discussion, full of actionable insights and expertise that's still full of heart and warmth. Hope you enjoy it. All right, Jonathan, Jenn, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We won't do. I know you haven't met, but we won't go into introductions straight away. We'll just kind of jump in. I thought a nice way of jumping in. We're recording. It's September, beginning of the school year, and I thought it'd be quite nice to hear what's front of mind. So here today we're talking about leading with purpose, and I thought it'd be quite nice to hear what's on your top of mind in terms of leadership right at the beginning of the school year.
So my interest is in evidence-informed kind of implementation and school improvement. And so the start of the year is always quite a big moment for us where we're working with schools on various school improvement initiatives and projects. So so we're very, not just related to climate change education, but kind of across the board. So very busy at the moment, working with schools, working with school leaders, helping them to really refine and define their kind of priorities for the year, and then think about how they kind of plan and deliver their kind of school improvement agenda across this year. So it's kind of quite a key part to really frame what's going on and to really try and coalesce people around what's going to happen across this year and plan that. So we're quite hands-on at the moment. Did a lot of work out with school leaders and kind of which is actually the best bit of it. So.
Fantastic. Thank you. And so, Jenn, you are, I guess, maybe one of the people that are your team maybe interacting with Jonathan and his team at the moment. I don't know, but what's front of mind for you at the moment?
Well, I think what I would say is we always prepare sort of at the end of July and into the first bit of the summer holidays for this time of year. So it isn't manic and crazy busy. It's actually really quite calm. It's all about getting a really crisp, calm, focused and purposeful start to the year. So in that sense, it's just very much about supporting head teachers to get that really great start in every which way, about setting expectations and having real clarity around those sort of messages that we're giving out across schools. And then it's like a switch flicks, I think, pretty much from next week onwards. There's a lot of activity around the implementation of our strategy. So as a trust that's just launched its 2030 strategy, again, lots of work went on in the spring and in the summer term. Now it's about really starting to get under the skin of the kind of implementation of it all, which is great. So yeah, quite calm.
That sounds amazing, calm. But Jenn, you said the implementation word first. So I think I think this might be a nice opportunity before we kind of, as we sort of navigate towards, speaking about implementation of climate change education itself. Jonathan, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the evolution of the implementation framework and where it is now, where you kind of started. Give us like a little brief overview, because I think implementation. Anybody who's done an MPQ in recent years, anybody who's kind of interacted with the evidence coming from the Education Endowment Foundation has heard this term, and Jenn has just kind of slipped it in. But I think it can still be one of those words that means different things to different people. Can you tell us what are we talking about today when we're talking about implementation?
Yeah, so I've been at the EF on secondment for a long time, for 12 years, I guess. And I've been leading this work around implementation for the last sort of 6 or 7 years. And because over the time of EF, I think one of the things that's come out of all its findings is that how things are done is as important as what's done. And that's reflected in the wider evidence base, where you look at essentially when programs and interventions are implemented well, you see the effectiveness and the impact of them increase significantly to 2 or 3 times. So there's this sort of, over the years with EF, the importance on the processes by which we go about kind of making actual evidence-informed decisions kind of becoming more kind of significant. That's what I've been kind of working on over the last 2 years. And I think we're at this interesting point in the UK kind of system, where I think English schools are now the most research engaged. People are accessing resources coming out of EF. There's more guidance reports. There's a real phenomenal kind of change that's happened. But we know that an awareness of evidence doesn't necessarily translate into changes in practice, and the process of kind of interpreting it, translating it, and implementing it is what turns that kind of awareness of evidence into tangible changes in practice. So so that's going to become a key kind of part of this agenda, and as you say, through things like MPQs and changes to teacher standards, and much more kind of awareness of it. So it's what I say, that it doesn't matter how good an idea is in principle, or what your kind of the plan is. The only thing that matters is how it manifests itself in terms of people day to day, and the practitioner is the intervention. The program or the plan or the strategy sort of just represents the potential for something to happen. So the kind of the thing that ultimately matters is how is it to translate into behaviours and practices that then have an impact on what pupils do. So it's the kind of where it all ends to a degree, really.
Yeah. I think that one of the things I'm hoping will come out of this conversation is Jenn's going to tell us hopefully a little bit more about what's special about Northern Star Academy Trust, where where she's the CEO, and I'm hoping that through that, Jonathan, you can pull out some of those key things that you're looking for. Hoping to see, I could already see you nodding when Jenn was talking about the start of the school year, and I think there's something about. Maybe, Jenn, you could tell us now something about what you think is special about Northern Star and the way in which you go about getting things done. That calm start to the year, I think it's aspirational. I know that lots of schools around the country are achieving that. Maybe you could tell us something, what's special about your trust.
Yeah, I think, and I guess where we're at has come from obviously experience and lots of failure and lots of things that we've attempted to do and had interesting learning experiences from, is probably the best way of putting it, particularly around the adaptation and implementation of using the EEF framework in itself. But I think what works well for us, I'm not going to use the word special, but I'm going to use what works really well for us. What I think we've had success from doing is having a very clear strategy that has a clarity of purpose and real intentionality around the why, and then the what and the how in terms of how we communicate that out to everybody. We had a 2025 strategy, so we've led for the last 10 years with a really clear blueprint and roadmap. But what I would say is the learning that came out of the last one has made the current 2030 strategy so much stronger and so much more precise. And that I use that word intentionality because that, for me, in terms of working with the leaders that I directly line manage, and therefore the way that they lead across the trust, is being really intentional and very clear about what we want to do, and not getting rid of the kind of noise in the marketplace, if you like, and being very purist about that's what we want to do, and this is the rationale for it, this is our why, and that collective engagement around the why. And I think that's come out of experience, but it's such a helpful stance to have when you're trying to implement something that requires everybody to really understand and buy in and have collective sort of winning of hearts and minds, if you like, in terms of being all part of it, that collective responsibility around it. So yeah, I think that's that's where we're at. We've got so much that we're working on, but it feels like we've got some really exciting traction around it, particularly around our climate change education work.
You just talked there about the collective and the buy-in from everybody.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that? Give us a bit more about like the sound. How long would you say it's taken?
Well, at least 6-7 years to where we are now, and it's only right now that we're at a place of confidence. I think it's like this has been this is a long piece of work. You know, when I think about cathedral thinking, something that's, you know, really, really long-term thinking around this. However, it's one of our 4 strategic priorities, and it has absolute urgency around it. So it's kind of marrying up something that's really critically important and has urgency with that long-term thinking and the necessary vision right into the future of what we want to try and achieve. So it's kind of that balancing those 2 things. In terms of over those 6 years, we've done all different types of bringing people together, whether it is conferences, mini conferences, gatherings, all sorts of different types of events that have kind of coalesced our thinking around this. And all along, the trust has grown. So it's how you do that with a group of people, then a new group of people, because literally our trust every single year has welcomed a new school. And then a year ago, we welcomed 6 new schools to get to where we are now at 15. So it's how you do that with a different audience, keeping it really fresh, really focused, but not losing that kind of thread around the importance of what we're trying to do. And I think that kind of bringing people together, we had an incredible conference in February that was, so from February to now in September, it has been all the, that first bit of the kind of implementation framework where we've been doing loads and loads of exploration. You know, we got our strategy really clarified back in January. Significant amounts of work with trustees and all sorts of different other stakeholders, and then from February to now, it's been lots and lots of deep kind of exploration. We've probably got quite a bit more of that to do, but we're more confident about launching into the next phase. Really, I'll pause there.
Thank you, Jonathan. What's sticking out for you in what Jen's talking about there? I feel like I'm sure there must be so many hitting. So what's coming out for you? Can you bring us back to the evidence if you like, or however you want to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of find myself sort of playing effective implementation bingo as you're talking, going, yeah, that's good. You know, that aligns with the evidence. That aligns with the evidence. I mean, I mean, a couple of themes in what you were saying there. Doing this in the guidance report from EF and the review that we did that underpins that, I think one of the things that comes out really strongly is the kind of the importance of getting the interactions right between people within implementation. I mean, you can talk about phases and activities and, you know, strategies, but ultimately it comes down to people and how people are kind of are engaged and are involved in implementation. And we come up with these 3 cross-cutting behaviours that the evidence suggests are really important to drive effective implementation. They're referred to as engage, unite, and reflect. And as you were talking there, Jenn, about really getting on the same page about why you're doing something, what that's going to involve, you know, what's expected, you know, and that really speaks to this what we refer to about uniting. So we talk about the uniting values, united knowledge, united understanding, and that's often that's often where implementation struggles. You know, it's we say in the guidance, I've got a line here: poor implementation can often be traced to different values, understandings, and practices. This incoherence creates ambiguity, meaning people might appear as though on the same page when they're not. You know, and it's so often now, you see it everywhere now. I see when things you know fall apart, it's often down to that. You know, there's often a lack of coherence and sort of so actions that kind of align and unite people are really kind of key driver of implementation. So things like implementation planning, if you do that collaboratively and you share and discuss plans, then it's a tool to help get people on the same page around the why, the what, the how, and things like that. And you know, I don't. It'd be interesting, Jen, to see how that relates to climate change education in particular. But I think, again, you know, there can be kind of fuzziness, can't there, around definitions around climate change and sustainability. There can be kind of fuzziness around the kind of, you know, the conceptual knowledge that sits underneath it and things like that. And you know, there can be fuzziness around exactly what to measure and what this is going to look like in classrooms and things like this. So I think these themes around, you know, uniting around right at the kind of heart of it, the real fundamental reasons about why we're doing that, and really giving space and time and engaging people properly in that. And then kind of getting into the more practicalities about, well, what's this going to mean? You know, what's it going to involve? I think that kind of, for me, this sort of theme around uniting is the kind of beating heart of this work in many ways. But the time, but then the second point about the time it takes to do that as well. And, you know, you said that you're starting this in February and you're doing that explore work. I think one of the kind of pitfalls of implementation is that we have this idea, and then, you know, this is right across the sector, we kind of rush then to kind of delivering it without spending the time to really explore the context, without spending the time to really kind of prepare the ground, to engage staff, to get on the same page. And the evidence suggests that, you know, time spent on that will pay dividends down the line, you know. So that, as you were talking there, the kind of those two themes, I think, are really, you know, are really relevant back to the evidence.
Jen, can you respond a little bit about that? So you've got schools in different parts north of England, but still different parts of the country. And can you talk a little bit about the work you've done to make this a priority across the trust? So really uniting the trust. So you mentioned that you've got, you know, 4 strategic priorities, and here you're saying, I just want to be clear, you've got climate change education as one of those 4 priorities across the trust.
It's reflecting hard on that question, actually, because it's one I was asked most recently as well. I think we've come at it from different perspectives. I think multi-academy trusts evolve, and I think certainly ours, because we've been working on it for over 50% of the time that we've been an organisation.
You mean, sorry, Jen, you've been working on climate change education for 50 years.
That's right, specifically. Yeah. So, you know, our inception was in 2017. Sorry, it was in 2015, and then 2017 is when I became the second generation CEO. But so, you know, an organisation that's been alive for 10 years, and for at least over half that time, climate change and environmental sustainability has been like a really strong foci of everything that we've done. It's the way that we've coalesced people, coalesced everyone's thinking around it, has come from many different considered actions, I think. So the first thing that we got fairly right in 2020, pre-pandemic, was that it was absolutely driven by trustees. So quite rightly so, the strategy should be absolutely come alive from what trustees are believing is the most important things that we should be concentrating on, and without sort of going back too much to that time, the bit that's given is that we're working incredibly well to deliver high quality education. That's just the given bit. The bit around educational outcomes is the given bit. And the bit about value added and doing differently was the climate change bit, if that makes sense. So that was the, you know, what is it that's going to, that we passionately believe in as an organisation, that we can make huge value to, and for really ethical reasons do differently. So I think because it came from trustees as such a prominent priority in their minds, that it started life well, if you like. And then from that point onwards, we were purposeful in the recruitment of trustees. So having trustees on our board that share that absolute commitment and set of values and have expert skill sets in that area. So, you know, as multi-academy trusts, there are very specific skill sets that we're looking for, but actually that additionality around the environment and climate change education is not something that we're necessarily expected to have as a set of skills and knowledge, but for us, we felt that it was vitally important. And then that's kind of travelled through to our governing bodies. So people that are working at a sort of local governance level, we're really keen to appoint people there that also have a skill set around it. So that's just one example of kind of how from a governance perspective. Then when I think about leaders, I would say that the schools that have joined our trust and then the leaders that we've appointed, and we've been fortunate to appoint quite a few new head teachers over the years, we've made it really clear that this is what we're very committed to and highly passionate about. And we hope that we're going to have people that are applying for those jobs that share that, just if that makes sense. So, I think I'm, really privileged now to have a group of head teachers that I work with and that other executive team colleagues work with that are just, from the soul, they are absolutely dedicated to this, like heart, mind, all the rest of it, and some more than others, and that's absolutely fine. But they know that this is what this is what we are. This is what we're living and breathing. So it's the subtlety of the actions that we've taken as trust leaders to kind of build this movement around this really important agenda. Yeah, and just making it our priority.
Thank you, Jen. Jonathan, how's the implementation bingo going? What's the
Pretty good. Yeah, just ticked up another couple.
tell us about you mentioned pinch points before, and kind of potential pitfalls that schools can fall into.
Sure.
And I can imagine you've seen where they could have been. I think in the story that Jen's just been describing there, like what has she avoided?
Yeah, I mean, what I was thinking as you were saying there, Jen, reflecting on was it relates to this. There's another behaviour we talk about, engage. And there's a sort of, which on one hand relates to how do you really engage people so they can shape what happens with implementation, so they can collaborate, so there's they're an active participant in it. But at the same time, you also need leaders and system leaders, communicating something as a priority, setting the direction of travel, corralling efforts, keeping it on track. And there's this I think it's this healthy tension between the sort of distributed leadership, but across all our work, I've done a lot of work on teaching assistant deployment. You need to, and again, it really matters with the leaders and the trustees setting out this is a priority and it's going to remain a priority and we're going to work on this. Sure, we're going to work on other things, but it really matters not just whether or not leaders are involved, but how they're involved and the way in which they're kind of, setting the direction and the values, and explicitly talking about the values that underpin that. At the same time, not just doing it as a top-down way, but really giving an opportunity for people to kind of, again, feed into that and shape that. So as we're talking about that, again, that's really aligned with the evidence that we've kind of, that's come out of all of this work we've been doing. The kind of pinch points sort of concept is again, that came out of the work around teaching assistants, which is we've done a lot of work to mobilise the evidence around effective deployment of teaching assistants, and over the years in doing that, we've realised there are a kind of common set of challenges that can emerge around changing the way in which TAs are used in schools, and some sort of themes that tend to emerge out of that are specific to that topic. Without getting distracting into the TA topic. There's some specific challenges. So this notion of kind of sort of topic specific implementation pinch points, and if you can identify those common challenges, then they're there. They're in plain sight. And we talk to school about some of those kind of common pitfalls, and then schools can reflect on the degree to which they're facing those challenges, and then crucially, we can come up with strategies to mitigate against them. That kind of concept of identifying for that particular change, what are some of the kind of common challenges around it? So they look very different, say, if you're implementing metacognition as a pedagogy,
right,
than it would be if you were doing something on climate change education. So I'd be interested, Jen, to get your thoughts on what you think some common challenges? What are some of the kind of sticking points and the implementation challenges around implementing climate change education? I mean, I'm aware of a few of those, but it'd be keen to hear your thoughts on what you think.
Yeah, I think well, for me, it's about the strategic significance that we give to what we're doing. It's just really important, particularly with the scarcity of resources that we've got. And it's that's so current right now, is that whether those resources are people, time, money, there's with the challenges and pressures around them, we've got to make sure that we are have really clear alignment around our purpose. It's got to really seriously think that through. I think in terms of pinch points, we've just heard this week that we've got our new Ofsted framework to make sense of, and it's quite interesting because there's a flurry of activity around that. And what I've tried to do this week is send out messages again of calm, because let's remember why we truly are here. It's the regulator doing their job. That's great. We've got a little bit of influence, and we certainly would involve ourselves in some lobbying, but at the end of the day, that's the framework. We've now got to make sense of it, but let's just do that in a really calm way. And what we typically see in education sometimes can be the opposite of that. And it's just trying to support colleagues to, again, with all the things that they've got to lead on, where there's all sorts of tensions, is do it in a way that kind of makes sense to the order of it, if that makes sense. As a previous head teacher, I could end the day just thinking, I've actually achieved nothing today, but I've been on my feet for 12 hours, and it's the stuff of it all. It's the stuff of the job, and just being able to have that self ability to kind of crystallize what you want to achieve, calm everything down, and just then put it into a priority order. And that for us is, climate change education is pretty high up on that priority order, and it has been, and it's going to be forever more. So, I'm happy to have really robust discussions with head teachers about all the stuff that they've got to achieve. But the more that we've been working on climate change and on all the things we do around the environment, the more I absolutely fundamentally believe that it's great for inclusion. It's great for children that have all different types of learning needs. It's great for working with the community. It's done incredible things in terms of creating a much stronger, long-lasting relationship between our schools and their communities. And it's great for children's outcomes in so many different ways. It's not a siloed piece of work. It just travels like nature does. It travels through everything that we're trying to achieve.
Do you see colleagues see it in the same way? I mean, I agree with everything you've said there, but do you see that colleagues see this? I mean, because the accountability can drive what we prioritise. So if we're accountable for literacy outcomes, we're accountable for numeracy outcomes. It can inevitably, we Ofsted look at the knowledge in the curriculum, and it does inevitably drive what we do. And I just do you see that is a challenge that across the sector? Do you think there's the same
definitely
level of kind of awareness of that? And I also wonder whether it might change with the curriculum review. I know that there's some signs that climate change education might feature a bit more prominently through what Becky Francis is doing as part of that and the team. But yeah,
let's hope so.
Let's hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, we have both primary and secondary schools in the trust. And I think that they do come at it from different angles, and there's different accountabilities for them in the main. But I think it's a really I think it's a fascinating tension that we're really happy to grapple with, if that makes sense. It's not one that's kind of and I think I think also, going back to your previous points about teaching assistants. So in our trust, we have teachers and leaders, and then we have associate staff, and in that associate staff body are teaching assistants and lots of other colleagues that are doing really important roles to support children. And we've done lots of work with those colleagues, involving them in the core of the group that are, we call them our Green Futures Board, but they're a group of colleagues that have just got all sorts of different roles, but there's a lot of associate staff on the group who are sort of forging forward with introducing education around climate change in their work in their schools. So it's not the head that's saying,
Yeah.
you've got to do this at this time, whatever. It's actually those associate staff going to their leaders and saying, you know, as part of the Green Futures Board, we believe that this is really important. Can I try this out? Can I explore this? Can I give this a go? And that's just creating another movement, if you like, within the organisation that's creating positive change.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the culture that you've developed that allows that?
Yeah, so we don't. So I've actually got it in front of me. So, we would say in every school, in every multi-academy trust, you have that kind of policy around conduct. That tells you all the things that you're not permitted to do when you work in education, and so we've got to have that. But we've flipped that on its head, and so we have a really positive Northern Star Academies Trust culture code. So, and that's all the things that you can do that's really explicit. And so we have a mantra that's about safe spaces, great places. So the safe spaces bit, well, both of those two things, safe spaces and great places, is all about creating that psychological safety that we need in education to be able to have, to be able to be who we are, to be true to ourselves, to be able to talk out about things that we feel, could be evolved or adapted, and to have that high level of trust where you are confident in the unknown that goes on. And I think that's my sort of interesting analogy around trust, is like that confidence in because of the way that we work, that we're okay sometimes with things that we don't know lots and lots about. We're okay because we've got such positive working relationships in a really safe environment. Now, we'll be working on that forever and a day, and we ain't got we ain't got that right in any way. It's working towards, if you like. But I think having that positive culture code that's really clear about open minds and listening actively. We foster a sense of belonging for all. So really exploring what that truly means. We collaborate, but we collaborate with purpose. We don't just collaborate. We're doing it with purpose all the time. And that kind of being clear about our shared responsibilities. We need more of that in the education system, quite frankly, in terms of collective responsibility. We demonstrate fairness and kindness in our decisions, and I know that's very clear in Kate's values as well. But you'd think in education that kindness was something that everybody was demonstrating and modelling, but as we know, it isn't always the case. We respect individuality, so I think that's been us being very explicit about that, and that attention to detail. When we're welcoming new people into our organisation, we go above and beyond to make sure that their first experience of us in any of the schools is going to be a great one. That needs a lot of work at. And then we celebrate achievements big and small together. So just that articulation of a really positive culture the culture code is for everybody in our trust, whether you are a student, whether you're a teacher, you're a parent or a carer, or the wider community. And we practice applying that, which is not always straightforward, but we practice applying that in the experiences that we have with people.
I'm going to ask like a bit of a, I don't know, maybe there's a word facetious question about this, like with somebody. So I'm going to ask Jonathan to come in on this as well. So we talk about these things, and what do you say to someone who says, well, yes, all of these things are, yes, I get the culture is important, and the culture makes it easier to get things done. But what if I say, you've got someone who just says, yes, I know we're not there yet, but we still need to push forward and do this, even though we don't quite have all the right things in place, we're still going to, push forward with our agenda. Climate change education is important. We're going to push forward with it, even though we don't have quite all the right ingredients in place yet. How do you respond to that?
I don't think. I think we're absolutely not afraid to pause and slow things down. Yeah, and also I think I'm imagining your question applying to the most senior leaders who've got and the colleagues that probably Jonathan works with that have got these all sorts in their portfolio, if you like, and 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 it's human nature as well to kind of rush through things. I love the concept of rather than having a to-do list. I'm trying to practice this, or we are at the moment here. Rather than having a to-do list, we have a to-learn list.
I've not
Because
heard of that one. I've heard of a to-done list, which I quite
no,
like as well. But yeah, to-learn list. I like that.
because
Tell us more.
the to-do list is, and you see a lot of senior leaders have them around, and it helps with they think it helps with their efficiency. But does it really help with depth of impact? Not sure. And then we've got to do that, we've got to do that, we've got to do that, we've got to, and they get to the end of it, and then the list continues, doesn't it? And there's not anything in that process that makes them stop and think, actually, I need to do that because I need to learn this, which we all do as senior leaders. And I think, particularly in one's position, turning it into a to learn list has then made me think, um, like where do I need to go? Like, who do I need to talk to out there that's not even in the multi-academy trust world, that's just out there in the civic partnerships that we have in the wider world that can help me understand X and therefore will help us improve education for children. And so it's hard to do, but it's a great self-challenging exercise.
Go on, Jonathan.
I um, yeah, so we talk about we've talked about engage and unite, but the final behaviour that underpins effective implementation we refer to as reflect, and it speaks, Jen, to what you were saying there. I mean, reflecting is a learning, really. It's about learning about what's going on, gathering insights, and then using those to get better. It's a kind of active process of learning improvement, and that you can reflect on people's needs, it can be reflecting on current practices, it can be reflecting on implementation and challenges, and doing something with those, and that requires both processes and structures in place, but probably more importantly, it requires the right mindsets. It requires, teachers and leaders to kind of be inquisitive and to be reflective and to want to, think about in that kind of ongoing improvement, in telling you, say you've been working on that for 6 years, but you can still see that sense of wanting to keep learning and keeping getting better and keeping kind of going and keep improving on it. And that, I think that's our implementation climate gets defined as how people feel collectively about implementation, and whether or not they feel a particular change or approach is expected, supported, and rewarded and acknowledged. The kind of collective feeling about that, and it has a huge impact on whether implementation actually happens, about how well it happens. So it's really, really important. But it's the overall climate of implementation is influenced by people's day-to-day experiences. Do they feel as though they're involved? Do they feel as though there's a kind of reflective culture? And essentially, are you enacting those behaviours? Are people engaged appropriately? Are you united? Are you on the same page? Are you kind of ongoing learning? So if the thing I'd ultimately say to schools, like, even if you haven't got, sometimes the best way to develop that climate is to pick something and use it as an opportunity to go about change differently. You can really think about how you're going to involve people, really think about how you're going to be kind of, reflective and keep improving. And out of that, a more positive climate and implementation climate will emerge. But yeah, I mean, as you were speaking, I would have, I think it must be a great place to be in one of your schools. It sounds like a really, really thriving, exciting, interesting place to be.
The schools are on different, but they're on at different stages.
Right.
That's what I always say to people is, there are schools that have been really trying things for a long time. And then there are others that are just starting out on it. And then there's actually some of our recent schools that have just joined us. Actually, they really got to the nub of it pretty quick. I've been so I've just huge gratitude actually for the way that the leaders in those schools have thrown themselves into it, and are making sort of rapid changes. So, where schools that have been in the trust a long time are perhaps kind of doing a bit more, taking things a lot slower, and all of that's absolutely okay. I always say that. What I always want though is the representation of it all when we come together and do things. That's just, the inclusivity of it all.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and I think the other thing when you were just talking there is, what we should be really doing in education is creating the climate for ideas to really flourish. And so for me, um, welcoming divergent thinking, welcoming that idea from those colleagues that don't have leadership jobs. I spoke yesterday to one of our site supervisors, and he just revealed that he was level 3 forest school trained, and he'd not spoken to anyone about it at all. He's just been getting on with his head down. Now he's let the cat out of the bag. Immediately, it's like,
yeah,
okay, I'm going to be next time I'm back, in your school for whatever reason, we're going to be having much more of a conversation about. And you can see, his face started to really light up when he was remembering that qualification and the work that he was doing that went back about 8 years.
yeah,
And it's just tapping into all those wonderful skill sets of everyone. Um, and I think one of my jobs that I would say as a trust leader is kind of bringing people together, whether it's map
yeah.
making or brokering but listening, picking up, and then one person that works in that school and one organisation here and putting them together, and then walking away and letting and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean that's again super aligned with, yeah. We talk about this. There's a concept in the guidance. Talk about people enable change,
Yeah,
and that we're not always great at being really thoughtful and strategic about the range of people that are available to support change. And yes, that includes leaders, but it can include your NQT that's sort of super enthusiastic, who's got something kind of quickly, and they provide. You'll always get early adopters, so sort of
yeah,
people that pick it up, but we're not always great at spotting those sometimes and then using them. They might be able to help someone who's got a challenge. So often I find that there are implementation barriers. Of course there are. Of course we have challenges, but often the solutions can often be
yeah.
within grasp. But we're not always. And we relate that often to people. And so so again, obviously, it's that notion of not just distributing leadership, but being really thoughtful about the range of people who are available to support implementation, which includes staff, but can also include parents, includes students, it can include people across the school community, and trying to kind of, also then empowering them and giving them some agency to be able to bring those skills and knowledge to bear as well. Like we can identify them, but you really need to give them the kind of like empower them to be able to support that. And yeah, again, as you were just talking there, that was really aligned with. It's great. It's so satisfying to hear like the evidence and the theory play out when you're talking about what you're doing, because it really fits really well with it.
One thing that we need to absolutely get better at though is the evaluation of it all. I think
Mm,
that is for me the stumbling block really, um and just how do we really have we got the structures and processes in place to do great evaluation and capture that evidence base?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
how are you starting to answer that question? So, obviously there are so many different priorities. So this is always coming back to that, that pushback on accountability. And it's like, well, no, climate change education is important and we're making this a priority. So what have you started to do, maybe with your school leaders, to start, that monitoring and the evaluation piece? It's like, so, you've decided that this is important.
Well, just two things that I'm really keen also to learn from Jonathan on this is that so again making what we already do work for us. We have a really strong peer review system in our trust. So the whole notion of peer-to-peer review provides us with lots of interesting information that we sense make from. And then we have a lot of external validation. So we have a lot of quality marks we've tapped into, be they what they are, whether they're quality marks from the RHS or John Muir, or I mean the list goes on and on, but actually using quality marks has been really useful because the sharp focused pieces of kind of gathering and thinking and then collating that for assessment. So we've had those for a long time. So they're really, really useful. What I think's interesting about the way that the Green Futures Board works is that we've now got this what I would call that continuous feedback loop. So that in itself, that kind of continuous feedback loop about what's been trialled and worked on and then shared across that group and on that group of colleagues from every single school has been powerful. And I think, you can get to the nub of, we've tried that, but for us, it didn't work for these reasons. Another school might do the same thing, but based on what they've heard, they might adapt it slightly differently. So those two things are definitely what we've got in place. And we've got more colleagues working cross-cutting. There's not, so that you're getting rid of all the silos in a trust and you're cross-cutting on. And so I think it's a really good opportunity to look at from a curriculum perspective. One example is last term we had a primary art teacher and a secondary art teacher working together, and the secondary art teacher working in the primary school and vice versa. And so, and those opportunities for learning there were immense. And, they started with obviously the Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3 curriculum content and really looking at it from the perspective of where does it really make sense for us to address climate change in the disciplinary knowledge that we're going to be delivering to these children. So we haven't evaluated that yet. That's why I'm really keen to, hear as many ideas as possible, really, in terms of what we do next. I think the other next piece of work for us as well is monitoring pupils' awareness and agency around it. I want to do a really get into the nub of this piece of work with young people, because it's their voice that's going to really inform.
So, Jonathan, measuring impact is, I don't know. It's like it's one of those. It's a challenge, and I think particularly in the education sector where we're doing things for the sake of the children, for the sake of society, and these are not as clear cut as, we're working in a different sector. It's like, yes, we're making profit and money. You can count money and people count money in the same way. And it's very simple, but we can't count outcomes for children. We don't count them all in the same way. So can you talk, just kind of responding to Jenn's kind of, well, I guess it's a bit of you're still in the explore phase, I guess, of your what you might be doing for evaluation. So what do you have to say from the perspective of the
Yeah, I mean it's quite common to hear that as a major challenge around implementation. But the fact that it's something you want to tackle, I think is the kind of key part of it, really. I mean, our framing of implementation is a bit different than other people's. We talk about implementation as a process of making and acting on evidence-informed decisions, and that evidence should really feed into all aspects of what you do with implementation, both the decisions around what you implement, but also the process by which you go through it. And this notion that really implementation requires learning and adaptation that's informed by data and learning and insights as it goes on. So that requires both looking, at external evidence and external research, but it also requires gathering insights, of course, within the school, so sometimes I describe what we do more as evidence-informed implementation. So, if, as you say, Jenn, if you put in extensive effort into a priority over extended time and perhaps doing fewer things better, then we need to be even more sure that those things are the right things being done in the right kind of way, So we shouldn't decouple the process of deciding what to implement from the process of implementing it. You can spend a lot of time implementing something completely useless well, so we're trying to do a good thing well. We're trying to both think about the what and the how, and and evidence from the EF and other organizations that are available. But there's evidence there around what works, and that comes out of trials and guidance reports and reviews that can both think about what to do, but But for me, it's about kind of coupling that with evidence around also how we do that. And within that kind of, for me, there's sort of two dimensions to it. One is looking at the end impact, what are the kind of final outcomes that you're looking to achieve, and how can we kind of measure that? And that's challenging. But I think schools, we tend to think about that way a bit more naturally. Like a key part of it is thinking about what we call the implementation outcomes. What are the stepping stones? What are the signs that change is occurring that suggest that we're going to get those final outcomes that we're leading to? And we often kind of overlook that. We don't think carefully about what are the signs that, knowledge is changing, that practice is changing. What are people's perceptions around what's happening? Do people, you might be introducing something, it might not be feasible, it might be too hard. How do people think about that? And there are a range of quite well-established implementation outcomes, fidelity, reach, acceptability, that give you insights into the process of change as it's happening. But people need to, so there are, I think there's quite a lot of scope to think about designing a process by which you can try and track change as it's happening. But the crucial thing, people need to know why you're doing that. And that's what's come out of this piece around monitoring. Often people aren't on the same page about why you're monitoring. Well, monitoring says to generate insights to keep learning and improving. The analogy I use sometimes is like, if you think about as anything you learn as an adult, learn to drive or learn a new hobby or an instrument, we expect to be terrible initially, right? You start doing them, but you get better because you get feedback and insights that enable you to get improved. Often you might have a driving instructor or a piano instructor. So you monitor what's happening. Someone's monitored, and you get those feedback, those insights that enable you to improve. And yet in education, we get people in a room, we do some upfront, we do training. And then we kind of, we don't always create the scaffolds and supports to monitor and learn about how changes are occurring, both to find the barriers, but also find the successes. It's where you find out that you've got somebody who's really grasped it and running with it, and you can use that as well. So I think this is all underpinned by understanding implementation as a process of learning and improvement. And then for me, once you've done that, then you have to monitor it, because how are you going to learn? How are you going to find out how change is occurring? So the kind of like the warrant and the kind of the rationale for monitoring is in monitoring implementation, I think, is the first step. And then from there you can start, designing ways to try and track and learn about how change is happening.
Yeah. With, Jenn, you talked about limited, we've got finite resources, so we can't do everything, and definitely choices need to be made. Okay, we've just got a couple more minutes to our last question, which we're asking all of our guests. If you could imagine a world where climate change no longer exists, what would it look like? What would it feel like? Jonathan, would you like to go first?
Gosh. Well, it'd feel a lot more harmonious, wouldn't it? If we're talking about that theme about harmony, I think both with nature and the natural environment, but also with our, with each other as well. I feel like that is, I think how we kind of relate and live alongside each other and work together, I think, is really influenced by the climate. So I think, it would be fantastic where we could be really living in harmony with both the environment, which I think would really influence how we respected and influenced each other and worked in harmony with each other as well.
Thank you. Jenn?
I was smiling because the word that I've got is harmony.
Wow.
Right.
Bingo.
Yeah. So we're kind of imagining this world where humanity has kept its promise to heal and reconnect and steward the world differently. So I think for me, it would look like there'd be quite a visual shift. And when I thought about the word harmony, that education has its cycles, doesn't it? We're in a cycle. We've just had a long period of break. The cycle has kind of started again. Nature also really fascinates me because of all the cycles that we see throughout the seasons. So I think, what we would see and feel differently is controversially more rewilding. I think as a trust, we're really exploring what we're calling regenerative leadership, the whole influence by regenerative agriculture. I'm really interested at the moment in looking at the parallels, and we've started to really explore that. I think, you turn the radio and the news on every day, don't you, and listen to a disaster that's causing incredible chaos. So I think for me that wouldn't be the case if we'd got this right, if we were really kind of working to live in a planet that climate change was much more under control. So it would just feel different, wouldn't it? It would feel harmonious, which it doesn't quite at the moment, but
We can imagine.
we can imagine it. Yeah, we can imagine it, I think. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much.
It's just really nice to meet you, Jen. I found that really inspiring. Genuinely, it's often very difficult. A lot of this is painted, but when you see schools that are kind of, it's really, it's really good. It's really encouraging and inspiring to see what we talk about and the theory and the ideas playing out in relation to something really, really significant. So yeah.
Well, thank you, Jonathan, likewise as well, because I think none of it is easy at all, is it? And I think just hearing your reflections on the bread and butter of what you do has just been brilliant, really great, really great. And I think it's taking risks as well, isn't it? I guess I couldn't do this if I wasn't supported to take some of those really considered risks that we do against a backdrop of just ridiculous accountability. So I'm fortunate, I think, in that sense. But no, thank you, Dami.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. That's all for this episode. A big thank you to Jenn and Jonathan for such a thoughtful and down-to-earth conversation. We talked about how embedding climate change education at scale isn't something you can do once and move on from. It's a long-term commitment that's taken Jenn 7 years to embed across her school trust and needed purpose, resilience, leadership, and a strong culture behind it. Jenn and Jonathan really brought to life what that looks like in practice, showing how careful planning and steady implementation can turn evidence-informed school priorities into lasting change. Thanks also to our producer Graham Jameson for making this podcast happen. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with anyone who cares about climate change education. See you next time.